All right. In today's episode of PM Playbooks, I'm joined by Tiffany Rosenbaum, co-founder of Rosenbaum Realty Group, and also Repair Masters and Stunning Stays. And she's also the host and kind of the founder of her own podcast, Less Traveled. Tiffany has spent nearly 2 decades building, scaling, and now acquiring property management companies across Arizona, Texas, and Utah. She scaled her own portfolio from 564 doors to 967. I'm sure those numbers are changing all the time through strategic acquisitions. And she's also actively helping 5,000 families build wealth through real estate. We are going to explore the mechanics of kind of how she's grown her business, the mindset of, somebody who's looking to acquire a company. What are they looking for? How to deal with culture issues, and why the wrong clients can cost you everything. Tiffany, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Sina. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
It's always a mouthful to introduce somebody you know really well. It's like, I've known Tiffany for a while. I think I was most impressed when I first met you. It was about, was it a year ago or 2 years ago? Maybe it was almost a year.
When we were sitting down at dinner.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember. It was a year ago or 2 years ago, but we've obviously ran around in the NARPM circles for a while. But I think I really got to know you during a broker owner dinner, where we sat down and you were telling me about how you were, focused on helping people build wealth. And I thought it was really fascinating because we were trading some pretty specific notes on techniques that we've used to help build wealth. And I immediately knew that you're a sharp cookie and that you really knew what you were doing. And I've always described you to my inner circle as like one of the rising stars in our industry, because not only do you have the mindset of what it takes to differentiate yourself amongst the kind of sea of all the different property management products that are out there, but also I think you've had a really kind of an interesting take on your growth. You've had a lot of businesses, and I've had you on my other pod where we've talked a little bit about your journey and kind of sliding the chips in and going all in with what you're doing. I think maybe for differentiation purposes in this episode, tell us a little bit about the more recent chapters of Rosenbaum and how you've kind of gone from, okay, now I'm in the property management business, but I need to figure out a way to really kind of scale and grow the companies that I'm trying to build. What mindset have you taken what year is this now for you, Tiffany?
Oh, we started in 2012, so it's 14
Yeah,
year.
so year 14 now. What's different in year 14 for you?
First of all, I took the CEO role, but like a couple years, anybody knows me. I don't like to sit still. I'm like, I want to grow. I want to do more. And for the longest time, we didn't put any money towards growth. We were just like, hey, whatever happens, happens. We were that owner that was blindfolded going through the maze. Like, hey, we have no end. We're just going. And then a couple of years ago, I realized I really, really wanted to grow, and I wanted to push the limits and see how far I could push them. And as I did this, I also realized there's a big flaw in me and how we were doing things. I realized I wasn't the leader that I needed to be, and I hadn't grown my team to actually be able to grow and scale. And that was number one red flag and number one real big realization that I had to take to heart. And then one thing that changed last year, I became over the board. We have an external board that we report to that doesn't have equity in our business, but sits and tells us how things are and calls us on our BS. And as we have done that, that's completely changed. But this year and last year, our biggest change was going after acquisitions of property management companies and realizing that was going to be our growth strategy after I really sat down and really decided where we wanted to be and what was our end goal and what did everything look like for the next 10 years. So we mapped it out money-wise, like unit-wise, family-wise, business-wise, everything. And so once we did that, we had a roadmap to get where we needed to be. And so that's where we're going.
And just for everyone's sake, how many acquisitions have you done so far?
We've done 5. We've done 5. 2 in the last year. everything was really small until last year. And last year was like, okay, we're going to actually go after the companies that wanted to exit. How can we make this a win-win? Because there are people that are like, hey, you know what? I'm done. But they don't know what to do. And so sometimes they just like give their properties away. And I'm like, hey, no, let's make this a win for you. And so last year we started going after people that were ready to exit the scene, and we created win-wins, and we actually bought two companies that were over 300 units each, and started to decide that's the way we wanted to go, which was a really good way.
So, for my understanding and all of our listeners, growth through acquisition is definitely becoming more popular strategy in our industry. Having been acquired myself, I sold Propertyware to RealPage. Acquisition comes with it like so many complicated matters, both from the person who's selling the business and the person who's buying a business. And I want to get into all of that. But before we do that, just purely as a strategy, is the unit economics of growth through acquisition exponentially better in your mind than through organic? Because I would maybe make an argument that organic acquisition is actually really still a very powerful tool versus through acquisition through buying another company. Maybe talk to us a little bit about what made you want to lean heavier on one side versus the other.
Actually, I think the right answer depends on the CEO in the seat,
Mhm.
because either one is actually really good. The problem is the organic is slower and it's not as sexy looking, right? People go acquisition, it's sexy, and it's like it's the golden star right now that everybody's talking about. But I would actually say the acquisition side takes more effort, takes more dialed in, takes more time. You have more risk. I mean, if you're not going into the acquisition side in reality with eyes wide open, you could lose your shirt. I mean, you're literally doing this a different ballgame. Like on Q, I really like them. I look up to Eric a lot, and he even has something on his website that says, "I will never do an acquisition. I will never buy a company because it will chokehold our business." And so there's two different ways to look at it, and I don't think there's a right way or wrong way. But the CEO or the head of the company has to have a vision and understand what it's going to take to get there. And I would say an acquisition side is actually harder and more time up front than just the organic.
Right. And I think you mentioned this to me in another conversation that, when you do an acquisition and you're trying to pick an acquisition, sometimes you're like, I want to acquire a business here. And you have like a mindset like, this is what the business looks like. And then it's like, but guess what? You're going to take what's available. Right. So
Yep.
how do you even like identify the right the right acquisition target? Because like sometimes you don't have a choice. It's what's available out there for you.
It is. And so you have to have this pipeline that's coming in of different businesses. Because even this year, I've talked to 7 now, and they haven't been right. It's a relationship side. So the person that's selling has to really want to sell, or they have to want to partner up, and they have to want to give access to someone else. They also need to give up a little bit of ownership, depending on the partnership or the acquisition side. The person coming in has to be willing to make a win as well and go, okay, I'm not going to get everything I want, but what is it? I think that's where the person coming in has to decide what size they're going to acquire, what kind of team behind they're wanting to acquire. Will they buy a business that has no team? Also, is the company that they're acquiring, do they have metrics? Do they have SOPs? Like you said, you're getting funneled these businesses that want to sell, but do they really want to sell? And have you decided as a CEO what you're wanting to acquire? Because one thing right now, we won't acquire a business bigger than ours because the culture will overtake a lot of times. I learned this from one of my mentors. He said, look, when you go into acquiring, you buy a business that's bigger, they're going to overshadow yours and they're going to take the culture. So you better make sure that culture is good. And so what we've decided is we won't go and acquire a business any bigger than ours. I've also done one wrong, and I've realized I want to make sure the team is really strong behind. One of the acquisitions we did, we bought it, and I was like, hey, we can do this. And it took a lot of time and effort, but I realized the headache on that level was a little bit more of a headache than I wanted to deal with. Now we have a phenomenal team. We're going in the right direction, but it was turbulence for a while. And so
Right.
we got it up and going. So you got to decide. The CEO needs to really decide what kind of acquisition they want, and you got to be willing to walk away. And so, even though we want to grow and we want to acquire 2 businesses this year, I've walked away from 4 acquisitions this year.
And is geography a constraint? I mean, like I got to imagine, you don't just land with a whole bunch of businesses to buy in the Phoenix metro area.
I
You're
wish, but no.
you're looking at, new markets that you know nothing about. And from the mindset of the acquirer, when you're looking at a business, let's say I got one for you in, Indianapolis, where does your due diligence process start, where you're looking at a new market that maybe you've never operated in? Talk me through the mindset that you go through.
Uh, you know, 100%. First, it's numbers of the books, everything. But I'm going to do a deep dive in the market. What kind is it? Landlord friendly or is it resident friendly? What kind of occupancy rates do they have? And then what kind of laws do they have about employment? Because all those things really affect the business. Doesn't mean I won't do business there, but I want to know that with my eyes wide open going in. Because even within Arizona, some acquisitions we did, even in different cities, it is completely different. And so we just had our day off site and we really talked about that. Like, as you acquire, you can have some things that are streamlined, but when you have different offices, some offices will have to operate differently. And as we've acquired a certain size, we've been able to realize that and not just go in and go, hey, have them overtake us. But I think that's really important. Like, we've made mistakes and we made wins, but our mistakes haven't been too big because we haven't gone too big. We've wanted to learn through the process and understanding there were going to be some mistakes and understanding, hey, we need to learn through everything. But I think the number one thing, if you're going to go into acquisitions or decide you're going to go organic, if you're going to go acquisitions, you better have a team strong enough to bring in the acquisition and take it like a baby and help it crawl and help it walk and then help it run, because you're bringing in another business. That's essentially what it is for the first little bit.
I mean, this is precisely what I did at RealPage after I transitioned Propertyware into their company. Was I became the ambassador for these new companies coming in and helping them integrate into the RealPage culture, which was super challenging because, me, Bay Area SF tech startup coming into a Dallas company was a complete disaster. I tried really hard to make it work, and I think I made it work fine, but you can't control the rest of your team and their mindset and how they feel about being a part of a different company with totally different culture. I want to transition this little piece to something which I'm sure everyone is curious about, but what goes into the formula for you when you're looking at a business to come up with the valuation? Walk me through the kind of the back of the napkin math, and then what are the key elements that you're looking for?
So I really plan on I run it actually like a real estate deal. So I do. I look at cash on cash. I look at ROI. I look at cap rate. I look at all those things. So I bring in what's their revenue, what's their bottom line, how many doors do they have, what's the revenue per door, what's their net per door, and I want to know all these numbers. And then I'll put it into our formula. I like, okay, the owner. One of the biggest question marks in my mind is the owner. How much time do they spend in the business? Because as soon as we acquire, I'm gonna have to replace that person. And are they paying themselves reality? Because if they're not, I'm gonna have to pay more. So I'll put that into my equation so I really know what my cash on cash is and my net that I should be making every month. But one thing I think people do wrong here is 9 times out of 10 businesses are saying, hey, we're not paying anything for marketing. Okay. But on the average, businesses in property management churn 10 to 20% a year.
Mm-hmm.
So when I go in and I analyze a business, I also analyze that, okay, they're churning 10 to 20% a year. What do I have to do to make sure that doesn't happen? And then also grow. So how much money are we going to have to put in on a monthly basis? And then that's where it will bring, once I put that money in, then I'll finally get my cash on cash and my ROI and my cap rate. So I really know as a business, what is it going to be making?
Also, sometimes that churn isn't bad per se because it could be selling a property and they have a brokerage inside the business too. So do you analyze that piece of it as well?
Um, Not as much, no, because they don't have the relationship with me yet. Now, through the acquisition, I do a lot of phone calls. I try to really build that relationship strong. But 9 times out of 10, I'm finding when an owner, it depends on the size of the team and if they have a strong relationship or not. But that owner still has the opportunity to go somewhere else to sell it, depending on the contract. So then I'll go back into the PMA and go, hey, what kind of contract is sitting there? Because if it doesn't regulate who sells the property, then I can't really analyze it as us actually going to sell and get that sales commission. So there's a lot of question marks on that I would have to analyze to know that, to be able to put that in there or not.
So to summarize, you are looking for businesses that essentially are cash flowing well, but the owner isn't as highly invested in them and they have a strong team. And you do want to actually look at the churn in the business and understand if it's just normal churn or if it's a result of something bigger that might be happening. Is that fair?
100% fair. And to be honest, one of my best acquisitions,
Mm-hmm.
it wasn't making money. The business wasn't. But when I analyzed it, I realized where the shortfalls were and where the money could come from. And so we overpaid for the business. But on day one, like the
You
business,
fixed it.
I fixed it. And then also, it was making cash flow. So we overpaid for it on what the P&L said. But so the owner won, but then we also won because we cash flow positive, and then the business was paid off in like 6 months because of it. So
Yeah,
yeah.
it's really interesting because I get asked the question quite a bit like, "Hey, I'm thinking about selling my business. What do you think the multiples are out there?" And when I get that question, it's always kind of like a head scratcher for me because there's so much that goes into it. We see kind of in the companies that we've worked with who've been acquired, like your point, when the owner is no longer really engaged in the day to day, they have a really strong team. Everything is really well documented. Their processes are very visible and predictable, and they don't really have kind of these like fires that happen every month because of something going wrong. That's valuable. But then the clean data that they have as well, like they run really clean books. Their owner's not funneling a lot of their own expenses through the company, although that's natural, but it's like there's an excessiveness to it as well that some people push. And when it's all buttoned up and it's clean like that, those are all great. But one thing we haven't talked about is like the people element, because I feel like that's the wild card that pushes a valuation higher, because all those things equal, systems are great. They may not be your systems, right? And then you're like, great, I love your system, but I already have mine. But the people element, will you talk to me about that? Like, what does that do in a valuation for you?
The people element is everything. Actually, that will tell me if I will acquire a business or not. Because even when the owner leaves, if they have like a manager in place that is really strong and has the relationship with the team, then you know that team will stay in place. And that manager can really run it and be there and make sure things run smooth. So I can tell you, acquisition, the one that in essence wasn't making money, I bought the people. I literally went in and realized, oh my goodness, they have so many strong people here. I want them part of my team. I
Right.
wanted them part of my core. And so what I realized is I overpaid for it, but it was the best decision we ever made. Best decision. So a lot of times, if you have strong people and you worked really hard to develop those people, and so that they can run the business and they have the culture, a strong culture, then in reality, you can get a really strong multiple because of the fact those people can run the business and the culture is strong. And so having a manager that is really strong, I would say, is the number one thing that I look for. And I'll
I would agree
overpay
with
for a
that.
business like
I
that.
mean, I think that's the number one trend we saw acquiring companies at RealPage is that we always looked for a strong bench behind a good leader. And when a good leader leaves and a strong bench is waiting behind them, sometimes those people became so much more valuable than the business that we bought because they added so much value. But the tricky part is the culture game. And you brought up one piece of it, which is like they're a bigger company than you are. And, how the perception is there. Culture seems to be a really big challenge when you're integrating two teams together. You've done five. Give me some lessons on learning, because one of the things that I'm thinking, if I'm listening to this and I'm thinking about selling my business, is that when do I bring my number two into the conversation to talk to somebody who wants to acquire us? Because it's high risk for me. Because if
Yes.
something goes sideways, that person now feels like I'm checked out or thinking about selling my business and may not want to be here, or it opens up awkward conversation. How do you manage that from the acquiree's perspective? Like, you obviously want to know their team. At what stage of the deal are you talking to team, and why is that? How do you manage that so it doesn't blow up?
Yeah, so I'll tell you about an acquisition that we did, and I knew they had a manager, but he had already told me that she's going to give me 30 days, and that's it, and she's going to be walking. And I said, hey, look, I, I have put my best foot forward. I've told you you have a contract. I'm not walking. I want it. But your manager that has given you a 30-day notice, I need to have access to that person. I need to know if there's any way to turn. And so what I said is, I will drive up, I will fly up, I will do whatever I need to do, and you can be in the room. But please allow me to have one conversation with this person. And after about it was a couple weeks, he finally said, "Sure, I'll let you do that, but I have to be in the room." I was like, "That's fine." I said, "I just want to walk the office. I want to see. We'll come after hours, whatever we need to do." And so we did that, and she came in, and I could just see it all over her face. She was burnt out. She was done. She was out. And so the first thing I said to her, I said, "You're burnt out." I said, "You have worked so incredibly hard for this business, and I can see it." And she goes, "Yeah, I'm done. I'm sorry, And she was really respectful, great. I said, "You know what? Would you mind just, doing one-on-ones with me every week? Just, I would love to get to know you. I've heard some fantastic things about you. I mean, you were just a rock star for this owner." And I said, "I would just love to get to know you a little bit." And so she agreed. And so we started doing one-on-ones before the close, and I asked for permission. I said, because for this to be successful, because there was a clawback for this to be successful, you and I, as the owners now, like the guy the person that was selling, I said, the biggest win for us is if there's no churn. So we need to do something to make sure there's not churn. And so he
People
agreed.
churn or churn of clients, or
I would
both?
say both,
Yeah.
because if you churn people, clients go right out the door. But it was client churn that I wanted to make sure we avoided. And so I started meeting with this individual once a week, just for about an hour. And I just said, tell me what you love to do, what you hate to do. And she was like, "Well, I really don't like property management."
Can't
I was
fix
like,
that one for you.
I was like, and I was like, "Well, tell me what you don't like." She goes, "Well, I don't like to be in the day to day. I love business. I love operations. I love accounting." And she had been a controller. I mean, just the background was insane. And I was like, "Okay." And I said, "Well, where do you see yourself in 5 years?" So I was just asking questions to understand if there was even a win-win here or not. And as we got about the third session, I said, "You know what? This is what I need. And everything you've said says something like this. And it looks like you'd be interested in this. Would you even be interested in a conversation?" She goes, "That I'd be interested in a conversation." And I said, "You just got excited." She goes, "Yeah, I'm not going to have to deal with this over here. I don't want to be in the fires every day." I'm like, "Well, there's still fires. We can stop them, but there's still fires." And she goes, "No, but what you're telling me is the operations side." I said, "Yeah, the operations side is such a big part of property management for it to run smooth." And I said, "I'm looking for a strategic partner, someone that can really understand business and how to make sure things run smooth while I'm gone." And and to this day, she's with us. And she texted me the other day, and she was like, "I am so excited I stayed, and I love where we're headed." And but I think that's the biggest key when you go into the acquisition side, the time and effort you need to put on the team and making sure that they understand your goals and their goals, that they can align and that you care and you're not coming in to fire and you're not coming in to change everything. I think that's what people don't understand, and why, on average, when you acquire, people lose so many doors 9 times out of 10 because they're trying to change. You could see that with the big people that came into the industry. They were like, we're going to systemize everything. Well, that doesn't work with people a lot of times. And so we churn less than 10% during acquisition. We're more like two. Our last one was like 2.5% to 5%. And normally it's a lot bigger than that when you're doing a big acquisition. And so, and that's usually before close with us. We don't churn during clawbacks. Um, and so it was big. And what I've realized, and we've done some wrong. We acquired a business that didn't have a team, and so it was just a little bit rocky. And I realized, one of my mentors turned to me and said, "Tiff, if you're going to continue this, you need to understand you're going to be on the plane, and you're going to have to be the culture until." So they see you, they have your cell phone, they know there's a real person behind this company and not just a big PE coming in, just putting money into different companies. And so that's been our big play. And so we put a lot of time and effort into the people, a lot of
Yeah,
time.
and I see it. I mean, I've interacted with you and your team. I would say, like any other business in any industry, founders get tired. I mean, you've been doing something for 20 years. It gets kind of disinteresting after a while, where you're just like, I can't find a reason. My why has gotten really kind of boring for me. And I think the employees in a business, when they're working without any real equity in the company and it's really just a paycheck, they need challenge and they need motivation constantly to drive that desire. And that's hard to do when you're fatigued, and clearly you're not. And that's, I think, part of the reason, which is like the gravity that you have when people get near you. It's like they sense your enthusiasm. What is driving that enthusiasm? Because I mean, like, what makes your strategy so different than the owner who's been doing it for, 30 plus years and has kind of run the business the way that it's been?
I think people, like you said something really important. People need challenge. People need to see growth. And the average property management company doesn't get past like 300 doors. And they're doing it as a job. And so they have higher churn with team members, they have higher churn with owners. And what drives me is the capability to see a huge team thrive and align together and hit goals that were way surpassing. Like last year, we had a goal to get to, grow by 20%. We grew by 122%. So everybody got excited. It was a lot of work. But when you're growing, then people gravitate towards that. People don't want to be aligned with a sinking ship. People don't want to be on this, like, hey, where are we going? I don't know. They want to be like, hey, this is where we're going. This is where we're moving. This is what's happening. And they want that big vision. They want to be a part of that big vision. And so you named it at first. Our big vision is to help 5,000 families create lasting legacies and generational wealth. Like 5,000 families, that's 22,500 units on average for our owners, because our average owner has 4.5 units. Some have more, some have less. And so it's different. And when you have an aligning goal and a purpose behind it, I think you can push your body, push your mind past anything. You know, there were mornings that we were getting up at 1, 2 a.m. last year, trying to make sure we stayed ahead of this rolling ball that could have crushed us. And so it was just, you keep going, but it gets exciting. It does. There's days that I'm like, oh my goodness, what am I doing? But I love it. I love the drive. And like I said at the beginning, one of my biggest things is a couple years ago, I decided I want to see how far I can push past the envelope and break bounds, break what people think is not possible. I can't tell you how many people have told me I'm crazy. I can't even, they're like, why would you do this? I'm like, man, the people behind it is the reason.
Yeah, and you have a lot of fun. I mean, I see all your social media, like you do the Jennifer Hudson dances when you're introducing your employees, and I think the beauty of it is like anything else, it gets pretty routine and mundane, and keeping it fun and exciting for the team is one thing. What's your take on, because there's a ratio of team to doors, right? And people have talked about like the 101 ratio with 100 doors, one employee. What's your mindset on that, especially with AI now? It seems like people are trying to actively almost become like software companies all of a sudden. Like, I'm going to redesign everything, rebuild everything, and become a software company instead of becoming like a service business. And I see like right now we're in this really interesting phase where there's so much banter about like, I just spent 45 days vibe coding. And when I read those, I think that's really cool because you're learning to do what I've done for 30 years. Good for you. But still, that doesn't make a difference. What makes a difference is how you work with your clients and what kind of value you bring them. What's interesting in your narrative is like, while I think you have a deep appreciation for tech, it comes so far below your deeper appreciation to build that wealth for your client. And I've seen you put a heavier hand on vibe coding wealth building, not software building, which is, a really interesting phenomena because I don't hear many people talking about that. I hear you talking about it constantly and guiding people and coaching them and acquiring businesses and trying to figure out ways to build your culture and whatnot. That feels like it's got more gravity for, the future. But I'm curious how you view it yourself.
I going back to the first thing, like what do I think about doors per person? And I actually threw that out the window about 2 years ago because people that stick to that sometimes churn more people because they're like trying to go, you have to manage this many. And in reality, there should be a one on one to gauge numbers and the person. Being like, hey, what's going on? What are the issues? Because you might have a higher touch client. You might have something else going on the background. So I threw out those numbers a long time ago. And I do go to the DLER, the direct labor efficiency, but I go, hey, what's my bottom line? What's my net profit off of this? Where are we going? And I gauge it that way instead of number of people per number of doors. Because when I did number of people to number of doors, yeah, it was chaos because I was
Yeah.
trying to fit something into something that doesn't. Because if you're single family homes, your number of doors per person is going to be higher. If you're multifamily, it's just you have more headaches in multifamily. So I don't gauge that way. Some people do. I'm very intricate about tech. I think property management companies are going to try to become more tech based, and I think that's great. But I think it needs to be a companion to the team because I think what you're going to see this split a little bit, and then you're seeing it a little bit. If people are watching and seeing it, owners demand more touch, more communication, more information. Okay. They want to know there's a person behind everything that's going on. But so you need that person, but tech can help us be able to actually do it because humans cannot actually stay up with AI. It's not possible at all. So what we have to do, we really need to bring these two together full force to actually get the outcome that we want. Instead of what you hear, hey, I'm going to put in AI and fire everybody. Well, that's not going to work either, guys. But I think you can combine the two and actually get a really beautiful business out of it.
Yeah, we call it like the AI upskilling of humans, like the Iron Man stepping into the suit, and you're capable of so much
I like that.
more. But it's also very dangerous because the key thing, which I think I've sensed with your team all the time, is that they overcompensate with the relationship with your customer, right? Like they
Mm-hmm.
know that they can reach someone on your team at any time. And that is so valuable. And I think it's almost a competitive differentiator in the future of like AI everything is how easy can you get to a actual human when you need to talk to them. Like I use Gusto for our payroll. and it's so painful to get a human
Heard about
on
that.
the phone. And I'm like, listen, I've got to deal with this payroll issue. It is so important. Somebody's life depends on making sure that this thing goes out today. I got to jump through 40 hoops before I talk to a human being. And that's terrible. And I think that there's a lesson in there where it's like, to your point, we should be using technology to essentially eliminate all the kind of the inefficiencies that humans have to deal with and let the human gravitate towards the really important problems and make sure they're always there. You've done a really good job of that. And I see it in your team and the way you run it. Does that matter to you when you acquire a business? Like when you look at a company and they've embraced tech versus have not embraced tech? Like I kind of heard one narrative coming from you, which is like the private equity narrative, which is if I see you haven't implemented a playbook that I know if I implement, that it's going to be instant, upside. What about the company that has already implemented a strategy, but it's not your strategy? How do you look at the way that they're using technology and how it fits in your business?
I actually look at it great. Like if you have a strategy, maybe they have a better strategy than us. You know, I don't think I don't think one company has all the answers. And as we acquire, we've realized some offices, like I said, are going to have to run differently, and that's okay. And if they've implemented tech, and guess what? That's even more beautiful because what I look at are there three backups. So if you have tech, tech can be a backup, that AI, and then you have two individuals as a backup. Because if someone ends up, anytime I go into a company, I look up if that person ends up in the hospital, what happens? Who's making sure that it runs? If that person. So I go three deep on everything I do, and I go, how do I make sure that it runs? And so any business I look into, I look at the same. But one thing you brought up earlier is I combine tech and people. And when you're acquiring a business, those other clients, they're getting noticed, hey, someone's acquiring. So what I do is I actually call every owner personally. I literally take the time and call every owner personally to let them know who I am, give them my direct cell phone number. And some people are like, that's crazy. But that's also why we don't churn. Because I put my voice, my picture, my videos, everything out to them, and I make sure they have a direct line. So if in the moment they get anxious, because that's what happens during acquisition, clients go, "Who is this person? What are they going to do? Do they know what they're doing? Are they just acquiring a business?" Everything starts going through their head. So I have to alleviate that question mark, alleviate that anxiety before they have a chance to jump ship.
I
So
can't imagine doing that. Like I'm just listening to you and I'm the person I'll be like, are you kidding me? But I love it because I'm pretty generous with my time too. I think the more
yeah,
you are that way, it comes back in spades, but sometimes you have to go through a lot of pain before you get to the spade, the other
I would
side
say
of it.
it was painful on some, yes, 100%. I'm like,
Yes.
oh, do I get to sleep tonight? But it's brought a lot back, and I mean, the relationships that we've been able to build has been phenomenal, and it's helped us out a lot.
Okay, I'm going to ask the elephant in the room question because I know everyone's thinking it. What is my business worth, Tiff? Like, give me a range. Like, are we talking like, half of times of revenue? Is it off of margin? Is it off of, what I've been doing this for 30 years, Tiff. I'm so tired. I want to sell, but I just kind of want to understand what I think my business is worth. How do you answer that question for that person? I know it's so complicated because you have to look at all the details, but generally, what are you seeing companies trading for these days?
The bigger the company, the more it's worth. Ooh. And so you saw my light go off.
Yeah, it's all good.
The bigger the company, actually, the more it's worth. The smaller the company, the less it's worth. And the reason as I've started to research more, it's because of the team that's behind it. The
I
smaller
see.
you are, guess what? If someone quits, someone's in the hospital, that next owner that acquired it has to jump in more, and so it's not as worth as much. But I'm seeing a lot of different scenarios out there. There's one times, there's point nine times, I've seen two times. I've seen
Wow.
the bigger you get, the bigger you have your systems in place. So that's one thing I love to talk about. Like, hey, you want to get two times multiple or whatever you're looking at, and if you grow even higher, PE will come in and buy you for even more. So I think the biggest thing is what people need to understand is build your team. And I've talked about it for years. Build your team, make sure your culture is good, make sure your SOPs are clear. And then make sure your revenue per door, that's an important number. Your revenue per door. What are you bringing in per door and what's your net per door? Some people don't look at that, but you've got to start looking at how can you bring in more revenue per door so you can actually build your team. Because what happens is some people are just, I just talked to someone the other day, they're like $85 a door. Well, you don't have any margin to hire the big team to make sure they can run it. So you got to look at, hey, how do I build more revenue into these doors to make sure I can build a team so that they can run smooth if I end up in the hospital?
So I'm listening to this. I want to sell in the next 12 months. And
Okay.
give me a checklist of 3 things. You gave me team, number one,
Mm-hmm.
build a good team. You gave me revenue per door. And you're telling me what should be my benchmark for revenue per door. Like, what am I trying to achieve?
Huh. With who what I've talked to lately and where the market's at, I think you need your goal needs to be 250. Your goal
Okay.
is anything above that, I would say you're doing great. Um, you can get into the 300s and 400%. But I would say if you're getting 250, you're actually on the more than average right now. So
So I
that's
need a
fair.
strong bench. I need 200 or more per door. What's the magic third one? Is it great systems in place that you said like the owner is disengaged from the business?
Yes, I would say systems are huge. The more automated, the more that you can take off your team and the team can build the relationships, the better. Like what softwares are you using? What process softwares are you using? Are you using AI? Do you have AI agents? I think all those things are the next thing I look at. I want to make sure that there's actually systems that aren't breaking 24/7.
What about like reputation of the business? Like, do you look at like my Google reviews or anything like that? Or is that not as important to you?
I do look at them. I do. But I also know what we come in and do and what we can do in about 6 months we can usually gain about 300 250 to 300 5-star reviews
Hmm.
through our team, real legitimate reviews because of what we do on our back end with our residents and with our owners. And
Right.
so we go into an area and we can raise the star rating pretty quickly.
Well, I just have a couple more quick questions for you. I know you've also recently started something called Stunning Stays. Talk to me a little bit about how you got into that. Like, what prompted you to want to get into that?
Stunning Stays is a sister business that's midterm slash short term, and Daniel actually runs that. A couple years ago, we had a buddy come. We were talking one night, and he was like, "I do this with our single family homes," and we're like, "What do you do?" And he was telling about how displaced insured. And so we actually go after displaced insured for our single family homes on that side of the business. And they're furnished, they're nice homes. We do like the 9 yards on them. But like our 3-bed, 2-bath units are getting about 350 a night, 3 to 350 a night, paying 10,500, 9 to 10,500 a month. And we get these all the time. And then our big homes get about $30,000 a month. And so, like right now, we're 100% occupied with about 35 homes. And Daniel runs that one, and we have someone that literally calls the insurance companies and adjusters and just goes after the displaced insured. Because in the United States, every 83 seconds there's a fire. That's not including floods. That's nothing else.
Terrible. Yeah.
And every single day, someone needs a place to stay. So they have a choice: do they stay in a hotel or do they stay in a home? And in insurance documents, the insurance has to give like for like. So if they have a 3-bedroom home, they need a 3-bedroom house or hotel. If they have a 5-bedroom, they need to be able to rent a 5-bedroom. And so that's been a really interesting business, a really fun one, actually, a very fun one.
And then in terms of, this strategy to help 5,000 people build wealth through real estate, this was the vision statement that you had.
Mhm.
And how how do you use that as kind of your North Star, and talk to me about like how that's kind of the underpinning of how you run your business.
Everything goes towards it. So, like, every decision has to go towards the 5,000. Like, how do we gain more clients to help the 5,000? So we do free webinars every month. We do a quarterly meet and greet, which does market updates in person. So our monthly is over Zoom. Our quarter is in person. They can come to the office. We'll give updates. We do a lot of things to help our clients. And one thing that we're really excited about that hasn't gone live yet, we are going to be doing a custom report, monthly report that's different than I've seen anywhere else. So I'm really excited to launch that. But we do all this for our owners and for them to be able to actually make educated decisions on their investments and how to build their portfolio. So if we hire a team member, it has to go towards what is it helping us, the 5,000. And so every decision we make and everything we do is for the 5,000.
I mean, I'll just level with you. I think it's such an incredibly timely strategy because in light of, I had my brother-in-law shoot me a text message while I was traveling on spring break with my kids. Like, are you following what's going on with the AI hacking right now? Like, are you worried that one day you're going to wake up and your savings will be disappeared because someone hacked into your bank account? That sounds like kind of like, maybe obsessively crazy, but it's not that far-fetched. I think the latest models of Anthropic have proven that they're, very dangerous, and they've actually held back releasing them because of, the potential for them to be used for hacking purposes. And it's not that far-fetched to imagine waking up one day and looking at your bank account and having it just be completely drained. But real estate, on the other hand, can't really go anywhere, right? Because it's like an asset and you're going to own that. And I think that's how my family has built wealth over the years. And I think the timeliness of taking that narrative out to the world and saying, like, look, don't go buy gold bars, go buy homes that actually people pay you for every month. I think that's something there, of course.
Yeah. No, I'm incredibly, we've sat down at dinner and just talked real estate for hours. Like, we love real estate. It is definitely a wealth generating asset. And if people understood what it could do for you, it's like nothing else. It's something you can touch, tangible. It's there. But what I've always said is you make money when you buy, not when you sell. So you got to always buy right.
Well, Tiff, it's been a pleasure talking to you. Tell us just real quick before we wrap up. I know you've got your own podcast. Tell us a little bit about that one so people can listen to you as you go off and interview folks as well.
Well, thank you. It is business oriented. It is the road less traveled, because being an entrepreneur, you're taking the road less traveled. And so we go through every little bitty piece of business and break it down for those that want to learn more about how to run their businesses successfully.
Well, thank you again. And hopefully you've gotten people excited. If anyone wanted to reach out to you and talk to you about acquisitions, how would they get a hold of you?
The best way right now is actually Instagram, and that's Tiffany M. Rosenbaum, and message me on there. And we have free information to help you build your company so you can get a better multiple.
That's amazing. You were the first person that said reach me on Instagram on the show. There you go. If that doesn't tell you a lot about Tiff, then I don't know what does. So thank you again, Tiffany, for joining us.
Thank you. Have a good.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.